Hello, everyone, and welcome to Embodying Your Higher Self Tools for Living Consciously. And my name is Michelle Champaka, and today's live is Conversations Exploring Consciousness and Spirituality. And yes, I didn't give too much advance notice. I sometimes will be spontaneous in in delivering or doing a podcast, depending on what is showing up in my life and whether I feel called to share that with all of you. So, yeah, this week has been a bit of a rough week. So many challenges on a spiritual, personal level. I think a lot of people I've been talking to have been feeling in a very similar way. They've been getting challenged. A friend of mine I just got off the call with said she literally couldn't get out of bed. She was in bed all day. Um, it's intense. These are really, really intense times. And this is part of why I do this work, why I'm called to have this podcast, because I know people. We're all in it. We're all in this soup together, and if I can help support you, it also helps me, because there's no separation between you and me. We're all connected, and as I give, I receive, and which is a beautiful part of what this oneness means, being in that quantum soup together, so to speak. So today I'm inspired to talk about a couple of things. One is coming to mind. I'm trying to decide which one to talk about first: non-aggression or cultural appropriation. In a way, they're connected for me because those have been the themes for me in the last few days, and so I've just there's been so much learning about that. So for me, let's start off with cultural appropriation. So, maybe some of you know what that is, some of you don't. It's a term I've heard bandied about. It's really something that I would say a lot of white Western people talk about, probably more than anybody else. And if you take offense for me to say that, sorry, I mean no offense. But it is really part of the white Western culture. I myself, I'm Puerto Rican and Spanish, but I was born in the United States of America. So while I am definitely American, I have a kind of different perspective on things, perhaps with my Latina roots. Um, but anyway, cultural appropriation, which was so clearly explained to me, is the idea that we are appropriating somebody else's culture, and that is somehow inappropriate because it is. And I'm just feeding back to you my what I've heard and what I understand is cultural appropriation. It's feeding. It's like we're taking on somebody's culture, which isn't our own culture, and therefore that can be insulting to the person or cultural group that we are appropriating, that we are taking on. So I hope that makes sense. So I'll give you a very clear example of what occurred with me so that you understand a little bit more. So I I'm a shamanic healer and practitioner. I've been teaching shamanism for quite a number of years now, and I've studied with the shamans in Ecuador and in Bali. I've also studied shamanism with a white male, and I don't have a point of view about any of that, whether he's white or anything like that. But I'm just giving you a background of my training. I'm open to all cultures and learning shamanism, and I don't have a point of view about. One culture being better than another culture. At any rate, so I was about to run a training here in Bali, Intro to Shamanism training, and I found this beautiful, beautiful picture of a woman, and apparently she was white. I didn't actually even notice that, but she's wearing a headdress and she's got the makeup and the kind of the tattoos and the costume uh, of the traditional Native American people. And when I looked at her, I really saw this beautiful, empowered woman who, even though she's white, we don't know whether she could be part Cherokee or Lakota, Arapaho, Apache, Navajo. We don't know. We don't know her story. All we do is we see this woman who I see or I saw as standing very proudly and in her power and through the eyes of the Native American people, and perhaps even honoring, in my eyes, the Native American people, because she stood with a pride. There wasn't any, in my mind, anything disrespectful in the way that she was presenting herself. She was really a proud warrior woman. But unfortunately, the person who I sent that information to, who was going to host me at her retreat center, got very offended and said that this was cultural appropriation. She wouldn't be able to use this flyer. And I went, okay, okay, if you can come up with something better, that's great, no problem, many thanks. And a few hours later, that's all I said. The woman wrote me back and said, your response was inappropriate. You're not taking accountability. You know, our retreat center has to be, in alignment with the people that work here, and therefore we can't support your work. And I was really shocked, because there was no willingness to have an open conversation. There was just judgment and kind of pointing the finger, like, how dare you culturally appropriate, a real self righteousness that came through. And it made me, of course, it made me quite upset. I was really sad because, being Puerto Rican American, Puerto Rican Hispanic American, and having been brought up to really not be prejudiced or racist in any way. My parents were very open-minded. Um, long before it was acceptable, they would, invite people, all kinds of people, gay people, different races. There was no point of view about it. And I grew up with that, those beautiful values of accepting all people, all sexual preferences. I never grew up with any tainted vision of any of that. So here I was getting this judgment, and I really had a hard time with it, and it brought up a lot for me, and it made me realize how so many people have perhaps taken the whole idea of being PC and a cultural appropriation too far, because when we look at the melting pot that is the United States of America and Canada and other countries of cultures that live, many cultures, from the Chinese to the Puerto Ricans, the Italian Americans, and Cubans, and, so many different cultures, right? And we look at that, and it's now become this really a melting pot where everyone is appropriating from everyone else's culture. So you might even meet, an Anglo guy who's running a Cuban, who has a Cuban restaurant that the Cuban people love to go to. And I don't really think they would be so angry and say, you are appropriating our culture. How dare you cook Cuban food? Perhaps he went to Cuba. He studied with some of the best Cuban chefs. Actually, there's a real world example about that. There was a man who was accused of cultural appropriation. He for cooking Mexican food, and it was a white male, and he became a scholar in Mexican culinary arts, and he loved Mexican culture. He loves Mexican culture. He goes down to Mexico all the time. He loves the people, and obviously he loved the food. So he opened up his own Mexican restaurant, and his name, I can't think of his name right now, but he became quite famous and became a scholar of Mexican culinary arts. And a lot of people got really angry and said he was appropriating the culture. How dare he do this? He's not Mexican. He shouldn't be making Mexican food. Come on, really? What's going on with the world that or some people have taken it this far that this guy can't even make Mexican food without being ridiculed. Um, you know, when I first came to Indonesia, I saw that this beautiful Javanese woman was struggling and really couldn't make ends meet. So I actually taught her how to make Mexican food. And I heard years later, she became quite famous in that neighborhood for cooking something that nobody else could do. And it changed her life. Now she's not poor, and she's actually able to feed her family and have a decent life. Was I wrong to share something that I had learned, even though I'm not Mexican? Actually, I'm Puerto Rican and Spanish, but I'm not Mexican. But I love Mexican food. I shared with her how to make it. And now she's appropriating Mexican culture by cooking Mexican food in Java. But heck, her quality of life completely changed. And when I heard that by an acquaintance of mine who'd gone back to that warung, and I had no idea. You see, we never know how we're going to change somebody's life. We never know by helping somebody else what effect that's going to have on their life. And so I was grateful that I, so to speak, appropriated Mexican culture, shared that with her, and she is now cooking Mexican food. I know it sounds crazy, an Indonesian woman cooking Mexican food, but so what? If it's making her life better, she's not doing anything wrong. Just like the guy in the United States who went down to Mexico and learned about Mexican food and opened up a restaurant, he's not doing anything wrong. So where does this all end? When do we realize that some of these ideologies or ways of living are actually limiting us, and we're putting ourselves or other people into the box of right or wrong? And this is a judgment, right or wrong. You know, I'm right because I have more respect than you do for the Native American people, and you're wrong for using a picture of a woman standing proudly in Native American dress. What if we can change our perception and look at that woman as someone who is celebrating the Native American culture? She is not being disrespectful, but she is celebrating it. She's honoring it. What if we could look at the man who goes down to Mexico, loves the people, loves the culture, brings back that culture to America, opens up a wonderful restaurant, shares his passion of the Mexican culture and the food? What if we could look at that as a gift, that perhaps he's opening our eyes to seeing the beauty and the artistry of the Mexican culture and the people, that he's actually creating good relations between the United States of America and Mexico. He may even be changing the perceptions of people who hate Mexicans, who would never consider eating Mexican food, who would never go to Mexico. Suddenly, they're now opening their eyes and they're considering that maybe their perceptions were off and that maybe this is a culture they need to give a chance to and that they want to learn more about, and that this culture can actually enhance their life. So this is what I mean, what is this cultural appropriation and putting that label on somebody as if they are wearing, the scarlet letter. You have been, you know, you have been wrong. You are a bad woman, a bad person. I'm going to put the letter C, A on your body to show you do cultural appropriation. Stay away from me. I don't want anything to do with you. And so that leads me to talking about non-aggression, because it is connected. When we start judging, labeling people, cutting people off because they may have a different point of view, a different ideology, a different perception of the world than we do, and we cut them out of our lives and we say, I don't want you in my life because you're not, doing exactly what I'm doing. To me, this is a form of aggression. And to me, this is a form of doing harm to others. And my philosophy and my belief is that we need to come from a place of love. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with everything people do. I'm not saying to give up our beliefs in favor of someone else. What I'm talking about is to have tolerance of our differences, to agree to disagree, to ask questions. Michelle, why did you pick that picture? For me, I don't feel comfortable with it. These are the reasons why I don't feel comfortable with it. Can you tell me why you chose that picture? And if that question had been asked, if that person had even been open to asking that question, she would have realized that I saw before me an empowered woman celebrating Native American culture, that I felt a connection to that woman, because even though I'm not Native American, I love Native American culture. And I myself have a chief who is my spirit guide. And he's my spiritual friend and ally. And so I was so torn up by the judgment that I did take a shamanic journey to talk to my chief. And I said, Chief, if I've done anything wrong, I am so sorry, but please, can you tell me, is it wrong that I use this picture of a woman wearing Indian dress? Is this somehow wrong? Have I done wrong? And he said, no, you haven't done wrong, Michelle. As long as the person wearing my traditional dress is doing so with respect and pride, we do not have a problem with people culturally appropriating our culture. In fact, we are proud that people would love to share that part of our culture with others. We are proud. You did not do anything wrong, Michelle. And when I heard that from my spirit guide, Chief White Eagle Feather, I was really, I felt very, very at peace, and I felt it's so hard to explain. I felt so blessed to have access to, such an amazing spiritual guide that can teach me and that I can learn from and that I can get counsel from. And so when we're living our lives, I just watched that movie Thrive too, and welcome, Creeper Jane. Interesting name, welcome. And you're more than welcome to come live and ask questions. I'm very open to that. So let me know if you'd like to do that. Um, yeah, so when last night I watched Thrive too. It's an awesome, awesome documentary. And this is where the term non aggression came up. And I know I'm circling back to that now, but I wanted to be able to talk to you about it as well, Creeper Jane. So, non aggression has also been known as natural law. And I've heard a lot about natural law. I have friends and acquaintances that are actually involved in natural law. I like that term a little bit better than non aggression. And natural law is the idea that we can be self governing. We don't need an authority, a governing system to teach us right from wrong, that we can come up with our own laws of self governance, such as I will do no harm to others, I will live with integrity and speak my truth. I will I will choose to help my neighbor when I am able to. I will give as I receive. Whatever the laws of self governance are for you. But as a people, we would come up with those laws of self governance and that we would abide by those laws of self governance with the idea that people, we are capable of governing ourselves. We don't need a governing system that literally is destroying the world. We don't need war to govern us, and in fact, we don't need anyone to govern us but ourselves. And so the idea is to do no harm, to have no aggression towards another. And I loved, what they were talking about in Thrive too, and I highly recommend that you see that. I'll put the website in the comments because this is something that has been around for a long time. This idea, but there are so many people in power that are, of course, not allowing it to occur. And I imagine if we had a world where there was no new world order, which is in the process of being created, imagine what the world would be like, and no pedophilia, no more control by corporations, no more illegal activity with governing, and no more violence, perhaps even no more crime. Of course, it would take uh, a while for that to transition into that, but I think it is totally possible, and I think this is where we need to be moving towards. We need to be moving towards natural law and getting away from this insanity in the world. And yeah, I'm just really feeling it now more than ever. Being an empath, I can really feel the intensity. Things are really cranking up. And I don't know about you, Creeper Jane, but I'm an empath, and so not only am I feeling it within my own life, but I'm feeling it um, in the collective consciousness. And so, for any of you who come on to this podcast later and listen to the recording, for you, Creeper Jane, I want to share with you an awesome tool. I keep sharing it because I think it's an important tool to help us to disconnect from the collective consciousness, because a lot of us are so tapped in, it's really, really challenging for us. So remember, you can always just say, I totally and completely disconnect from the collective consciousness of, and then you fill in the blank. I disconnect from the collective consciousness of fear. I disconnect from the collective consciousness of anger, rage, shame, confusion, anxiety, depression, sadness, hopelessness. Whatever it is you're feeling in that moment, in that now moment, just say, I totally and completely disconnect from the collective consciousness and unconsciousness of fear, anger, sadness, and anything else that I'm picking up on, known or unknown to me. I completely disconnect from it now. I totally and completely disconnect from it now. I totally and completely disconnect from it now. And there's a thing that you can add on to this. I just thought of this now. And I choose to only connect with the higher frequencies of love, joy, beauty, gratitude, grace, and unlimited possibilities. I choose to connect with all of those higher frequencies right now. Wow. Can you feel that? I can feel that. It's so expansive. So it's all about intention. It's all about intention. And so we can choose to perceive this world as dark and terrible with horrible people. And we can go into that consciousness, which is really not a place I think anybody wants to go. I've been there, done that. Or we can choose to connect and embrace that this world, as challenging as it is, we can embrace the light, the beauty that is there, that does exist. We can feel gratitude for what we have in our lives, for our family, for our friends, for the people who have our backs, even for the universe. And so, circling back to what I shared in the beginning of this podcast about the woman who accused me of cultural appropriation and canceled my workshop to be held at her retreat center here in Bali. I could choose to be really angry at her, and I could choose to be like in a headspace of how dare she? Why did she do that? I didn't deserve that. And maybe those things ran through my mind when it first happened. Not exactly like that, but I definitely felt I didn't deserve it. And I could stay in that energy and allow that energy to bring me down. And I did that for about a day and a half. I was really down, honestly. And I was really down about myself and really questioning, what did I do wrong? I don't understand. How could somebody so misjudge me? I'm actually a good person. I love all people of all colors, of all races. And yet I realized, actually, in this now moment, as I'm doing this podcast, that this mindset would not serve me, would in fact bring me to a place of depression, a friend I know too well. And going down that rabbit hole is not good for me or anybody. So I chose to do this podcast as a way of sharing my learnings and also as a way of helping other people who are struggling with similar situations, feeling judged, feeling misunderstood, feeling like, why doesn't anybody get me? Why don't I belong here? And I just want to reach out to all of you and tell you that I get you. I know you don't know me, but I get you. I've been there and I really understand how you feel. And I feel so much love for you. I do. And as I love you, I can feel that love radiating back to me. So thank you. And let's make a choice. Let's make a choice together to choose to be in those higher frequencies, to choose to change our mindset, to get out of that self pity, the victimhood, because that's not going to get us anywhere, is it? But if we can choose gratitude and love and acceptance of one another, even with our differences, if we can choose to let go of our judgment, to live from a place of true love, to live from a place of knowing that the right thing to do is just to do no harm to anyone, whether it is in word or in deed, to strive to access our highest potential, no matter what. With these spiritual gifts, that I have as an empath, a psychic, a healer, there's always a dark side to that. There's always the possibility that I could abuse those abilities and gifts, that I could get back at people that hurt me. But I always choose not to. Even though there may be a temptation, I always choose the higher road because I have to. I have to. We all have to. Because what we put out comes back to us 1,000-fold, whether it's good or bad. But not only because of that, but because when I hurt somebody else, if I hurt somebody else, intentionally or unintentionally, I'm also hurting myself. Because we're all connected, right? We're all connected. We're not separate. We may have separate personalities, of course, and we have our separate egos, and we have our separate goals and dreams. We have our separate lifestyles. But we're all connected through the quantum field and the quantum entanglements of our consciousness. We're all connected in that way and spiritually. So when we look at that and how this consciousness is something that we are all connected to, that's pretty awesome when you think about it. It's pretty mind-blowing how we're all connected. And so what we put out into our consciousness and into the world, everybody else is picking up on that. It's like we all have these antennas on top of our head, and there's a radio frequency in the universe, and suddenly you're feeling like the channel isn't coming in clear anymore. There's a lot of static, and you're wondering, why do I feel discombobulated today? Why do I feel off? Have you ever thought to ask yourself, is that even yours? Or are you picking up on someone else, a lot of someone else's, in the collective field, in that field of oneness? So that's why I shared that tool with you. I totally and completely disconnect from the collective consciousness and unconsciousness of fear, of anger, of sadness. And I now choose to totally connect with the higher frequencies of love, joy, gratitude, beauty, open-heartedness. So keep using that tool, those tools, because I think you'll be pleasantly surprised how much you begin to get the awareness of how a lot of what you're feeling and experiencing doesn't even belong to you, that you're picking up in the collective consciousness. And so once we can discern what is ours and what is not ours, we can then come into that still point, that place of true peace within us, and really know who we are, and really know what is ours and what is not ours. So I hope that that this information is helpful for you. Please follow me if you haven't already. Please follow me. I'm going to continue to do a lot more podcasts, and I will be having a guest on every other week. Her name is Catherine. She and I are collaborating together, and her podcast is called Journey in a Box. So sometimes she'll be on my podcast and sometimes I'll be on hers. And we're both aligned, and the message that we're sharing with everyone, we're spreading the world of love and peace and joy and freedom from all this suffering that I can feel is occurring in the world. Together, she and I will work together for empowering all those who are ready to be empowered, who are seeking tools for their personal empowerment, sovereignty, and healing. So thank you so much for joining today, Krupa Jane. I feel you, send you loads of love and peace your way wherever you are in the world. And thank you to all of you who I can feel will be hearing this podcast down the road. Many blessings. So much love.